This is Times Radio.
And here's some news for a Tuesday evening. What is the legal age of marriage? It's a question for you, actually. Most people, I bet you're going to say it's 16, of course, because people always go, well, you can...
This is Times
List of the Women's Prize for Fiction, making sure you're fully briefed.
tomorrow afternoon from 1 on Times Radio. This is Times Radio.
And here's some news for a Tuesday evening. What is the legal age of marriage? It's a question for you, actually. Most people, I bet you're going to say it's 16, of course, because people always go, well, you can get married at 16, go to war at 16 or 17, blah, 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 and you can't vote till 18, so we need to equalise things down to 16. Well, actually, this is something that may have slipped you by, because the legal age of marriage has officially been raised to 18 in England and Wales after a bill passed through Parliament with little opposition. And under the new rules, those under 18 who get married will not be subjected to penalties, but adults who facilitate their marriage could face up to 7 years in jail. And the bill is expected to receive royal assent later this week. Well, let's talk to Payzee Mahmod, who is a child marriage survivor and IKWRO Campaigner. That stands for Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organisation. And Payzee, you're also co-chair of Girls Not Brides UK. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Hi.
It's a pleasure. Tell us why you think this change in the law is so important.
Well, I think it's a really crucial starting point because, one, it does take the onus off the child and it puts safeguarding professionals in charge of recognising the harms of child marriage. I believe that the government have to ensure that social workers, police officers, teachers, and everyone in our society knows that no child should be in any sort of marriage, whether it's registered or non-registered. And it's really, the responsibility of adults to ensure that children at risk of child marriage are safeguarded. And I think the law that's coming in will do that.
How did you manage to persuade MPs, ministers, that this was important, not just for women in the campaign groups that you're most closely associated with, so from the Iranian and Kurdish backgrounds, but for all young women and men, of course, because, of course, in most situations, there'll be one part of the marriage. How did you persuade them that this was important for everybody and not just particular communities?
Well, I think the important thing to remember about child marriage is that it can impact anyone. I mean, it's happening here in England and Wales. It's happening all over the world, in America, in Asia, in Africa. So this really is a global issue. I think the point to getting here and persuading MPs and decision makers is really talking about the harms and stressing the importance that the law that we're talking about that is currently in place dates all the way back to the 1920s and it's not fit for our society today. And also I've been talking about my own personal experience of child marriage here in the UK, age 16. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really helped to show and, prove that this really is a problem in our society that needs addressing. And I think that's again why the law is so important. It will change attitudes that are currently in our society towards child marriage.
What impact did being forced to marry at 16 have on you?
So much impact. I mean, the most important thing for me is my livelihood and, my childhood was stolen from me. I was just about to start college and it was a really, really important time of my life. And I unfortunately became from a teenager one day to a wife, a child bride of a complete stranger, a man who was older than me and was abusive. So naturally there was a power dynamic and I did experience many forms of abuse, mental abuse and financial and also physical abuse. And that is really why we are addressing this, because to address child marriage is to address all the harms that are coming with this. And no child should be in a child marriage and no child should be at risk of it. So I know the harms personally, and it's been so important for me to really ensure that when we're talking about this issue, people understand the realities of it, because I think often many people may not be aware of it and are not thinking about the harm. So it's been really crucial to put that at the forefront of the campaign and, change the hearts and the minds of people who are making decisions about this.
Yeah, it's important you say that, Payzee, because, I'm of the generation where people, youngsters of my generation, generation were getting married at 16 and 17, willingly, most of them were not of Iranian and Kurdish backgrounds, and sometimes their parents supported them, sometimes they didn't. So I suspect the vast majority of British people probably are not aware that 16 and 17-year-olds, are being forced. They probably think it's, youngsters, 15, being taken out of the country to other parts of the world, being forced to marry there, and then coming back sometime later under the radar, and then just having to stay with the marriage.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's really another thing that this law is covering. It covers every child marriage that is involving children in the UK that are residents here in England and Wales, but also children that are married outside of England and Wales and anywhere in the world. So we really see this as having a greater impact and setting a precedent for the rest of the world. I think it's really, really important that the UK is doing this and showing that we're actually taking a lead on this. And, it's about time this was done, and the rest of the world will hopefully be influenced in a very positive way to end child marriage.
But it's one thing to pass laws, but it's another to change hearts and minds and persuade people that what they've been practicing, what they accept as a pillar of their culture, is not right here in this country, and indeed not right anywhere. Do you think this law is needed because the education simply hasn't worked?
Well, I think it's a number of things. So I do believe that this law definitely will change attitudes. I think the law is a starting point. So it paints a really, really clear picture, no grey, picture where is it allowed, is it not allowed. It says in black and white very clearly that this is something that should not be happening. And I think that as a starting point, we obviously need to build around that. Education is so incredibly important, and children need to know, every child must be taught, in school, in education, that they have the right not to face child marriage, and the government has to fund education on this across all schools and make sure that all professionals are trained on this. So I think the law is a very strong backbone to this change, and then around that there's a lot of societal shift that has to happen, and education and training. I believe it's a holistic approach that we have to take, and the law can't act on its own. Yeah,
Payzee, I was going to say, I'm sure, and I've got to say this personally as well, and I've got to pay tribute to you for being able to survive what happened to you and then turning it into a platform from which to help other people, because not everyone can do that. It takes a certain degree of strength and courage. But what are the attitudes from within your own immediate community, from the Iranian and Kurdish women's community? Are people backing you now? Have they always done so? Or is there still hostility?
Well, I'm really pleased to say, actually, since we have been talking about this and campaigning on this, the public has really, really started supporting us and has really, come on board. And I believe that the mindsets are changing. And I think, the society that we're living in, we are shifting towards a more positive outlook on children's rights and, on this issue. So I think I'll be lying if I said there was no resistance in the beginning, because I think a lot of people didn't understand it, and I'd probably never even thought about it, that this was causing so much harm. And so I'm really pleased to say, actually, we had a petition where almost 250,000 people signed that. So the public really got behind that, including, my community and various other communities, because this is really a widespread issue. And having worked on this for a couple of years, we've seen that it affects girls and children from many cultures and many communities. And so, it's a really, really amazing journey to see how many people have seen the harms and have come on board on this journey with us and are supporting us. So, I'm very, very pleased to see that.
Well, you must be, Payzee, because as you said, that law has been on the statute book since the 1920s, so about 100 years. And the legal age of marriage has officially been raised to 18 in England and Wales, largely as a result of your campaigning and your group's campaigning. That's Payzee Mahmod, a child marriage survivor and Iranian and Kurdish women's rights campaigner and co-chair of Girls Not Brides UK. Thank you very much indeed.